Thank you all for joining us today. I am Kimberly Wickert from the University of Kentucky Human Development Institute in Retain, Kentucky. My preferred pronouns are she, her, hers, and my visual description is I am a mid-career white woman with blonde hair and glasses. Today I'm wearing a blue shirt and a white sweater, and I have a virtual Retain background. Brandon Canada is our technical support today behind the scenes, and the captioning feature is enabled, but you can disable it if you wish to do so. We'll also be monitoring the chat box throughout the presentation and the Q&A, so please put any questions or comments there so you can join in our discussion today. I'm going to ask you to participate a few times throughout our presentation, so please do. And you will be receiving a survey following the presentation today, and we appreciate your willingness to take just a couple of minutes to provide feedback on the presentation and help us plan for future presentations. We will also be uploading our presentation today on the Retain Kentucky Media website, and I have put that link in the chat box as well as our resources today. So as far as our disclaimer, the information contained in this presentation and accompanying materials is intended for informational purposes and does not necessarily reflect the views or opinions of the University of Kentucky, the Human Development Institute, or its individual employees. Although we attempt to provide accessible, accurate, and current information, no guarantees are made to that effect. Please join us if you're able for our next employment seminar series on August 17th. We will be discussing workplace safety in the stay at work and return to work process with our subject matter expert, Steve Thompson. As I mentioned, this information is in our chat along with resources for today's presentation. So our objectives today are to define bench strength. We're going to discuss ways to not only identify bench strength, but also to develop bench strength within your workforce. And I'm also going to talk about how Retain can promote bench strength within your workforce. So let's go ahead and get started. So you see this visual here of a group of individuals standing behind a bench with the word team spelled out, and we're going to talk about bench strength. And when you think of bench strength in sports, tell me what comes to mind. Do you can you take a few minutes and put something in the chat when you think of that? I'm going to rely on those of you who are sports followers to help me out here. All right, I see some coming in. Coordination, leadership, thank you. Who you can rely on. Awesome, absolutely. So according to Wiktionary, it is the quality and number of players available to substitute during a game. So having those individuals waiting on the bench is very important in sports, but it's also very important in business as well. And I see Derek also added, each member is able to contribute something to the overall success of the team. Absolutely. So for the purposes of today's discussion, a leader may be a formal management role, but it can also be an individual who contributes, that excels in their non-management role and leads others by excelling at successful completion of their job in productivity, safety, increasing overall morale of coworkers, or providing peer support. If you are a workforce or healthcare professional or an employer helping individuals stay at work or return to work, think about the perspective of supporting them in identifying and building their bench strength as we review these strategies today. So the definition for bench strength specific to the workforce is the competence and number of employees who are ready to fill vacant leadership as well as other positions. So as I mentioned, it may not be a formal management, supervisory, executive leadership role, but it may be something that that person excels in that can help lead your organization. So now that we've defined bench strength, let's move to our second objective and talk about strategies that we can use to identify bench strength within your workforce and your employees. So one of the ways that you can do so is by utilizing a stay interview. And a stay interview is a conversation with an employee to learn what they like about their role, what they would like to change. Stay interviews are an opportunity to improve the working environment of the organization, assess and modify corporate culture. And it's important to continue to assess your culture as well as modify it, and both uncover what motivates your employee and to also build trust with them as their manager. Stay interviews can also assist in the identification of bench strength or workers who may have those qualities or skills to advance within your organization and fill a different role. And again, that may be a leadership role, or that may be another role that you need filled that may not technically or formally be a supervisory or management role, but they do have leadership skills to be a good fit to move into that role. On this slide are sample stay interview questions. You might ask them, what gets you out of bed to come to work? What's one thing that you'd like to share with your supervisor if you had the ability to do so? I had one person who uses state interviews that shared with me that she says, what would you want to whisper in your supervisor's ear? How would you like to be recognized, or how do you like to be recognized? And if you could change one thing at work, what would it be? So those are some questions that you can consider asking in state interviews, and obviously modify those for your own team or organization to meet your cultural needs as well. Another way to gather this information may be in a survey format, and stay interviews may be formal and structured, but they can also be informal check-in with employees. And you can get a lot of information by doing that informal check-in on a regular basis. So I surveyed a dozen senior management professionals, and I see some of you have joined us today. So thank you very much for jumping on. And if you want to enter anything in the chat, feel free to do so. But in preparation for today's preparation, those individuals worked in the banking, utility, healthcare, managed care, insurance, and telecommunications industries. And I asked them this question: what qualities do you look for in an employee to develop bench strength? So take a minute and write in the chat what qualities you would look for to develop bench strength in your workforce in an individual worker or contributor. Initiative, absolutely. Each individual is able to work well within the group. So somebody who's a team player, who's supporting their team. Creativity, thinking outside the box. Attitude, responsibility. Continuous learning. Yeah, those are all really great examples. Work ethic. So when we move on and look at the next slide, y'all are ahead of the game, because these are the responses I received and are listed here from my informal survey of executive leaders. And they said authenticity, honesty, being trustworthy and loyal and accountable were very important qualities that they see in an individual contributor to identify bench strength qualities and to help develop that individual's bench strength qualities. Being proactive, fearless, having a hunger to grow as a professional, as an individual and within the organization, and that willingness to learn. Flexibility, emotional intelligence, or emotional quotient. And if you're not familiar with that term, it's the ability to understand, use, or manage your own emotions in positive ways to relieve stress, communicate effectively, empathize with others, overcome challenges, and diffuse conflict. And that's a very important quality to have when you're identifying bench strength to move people into other positions within your organization. Common sense, technical competence, intelligence, having someone who's a problem solver, a good communicator. We just talked about emotional quotient or emotional intelligence, and you see empathy, kind, friendly. Creative was one that was in our chat. Independent, team-oriented, committed, someone who's a high achiever. You can see how the emotional quotient is aligned with a lot of those qualities, and several of the leaders that I surveyed said it was important for the individual to be able to ask those tough questions, but also to be able to bring solutions to the table. They shared it was okay and really even expected that employees make mistakes or fail, but it was how you were accountable and solved the situation and learned from it that differentiated those individuals. Growing within the company culture was also a focus that I heard from these leaders. So succession planning is a process and strategy for replacement planning or passing on leadership roles. It's used to identify and develop new potential leaders who can move into leadership roles when they become vacant. According to the University of Washington, succession planning is the process of identifying the critical positions within your organization and developing action plans for individuals to assume those positions. Taking a holistic view of current and future goals, this type of preparation ensures that you have the right people in the right jobs today, as well as in the years to come. I've included a link to the University of Washington Succession Planning Toolkit in the resource slide of today's presentation in the chat. So we've spent some time reviewing how to identify bench strength within your workforce, but now we're going to talk about how you can develop bench strength as well. So progression planning is a term that I have used for the process of developing or moving towards a more advanced state for an individual in their occupational role. Look at your organization or your individual consumer, client, participant to identify where your workforce is specific to how they will progress through their careers. Do you have a workforce or individual that has entry level or less experienced individuals, but they have those individual qualities that we identified to develop into the next level and meet your organization's cultural needs? Are there mid-career individuals who have a desire to grow professionally? Are there seasoned workers who would like to minimize the hours or tasks they are performing, but they can provide leadership in other ways, such as mentoring or developing new leaders? Progression planning looks at your overall workforce and develops a plan to be prepared to meet the needs of your workforce where they are in their careers and personal lives, while also meeting the needs of the organization. An example I'll share is an on-call nurse who was required to be available after hours to triage injury care coordination telephonically. She had children who were school age, and she no longer wanted to work after first shift. And she had preferred to work only first shift. And the manager of this individual identified another colleague who preferred to work in an on-call capacity as it was better aligned with her needs. This was identified through a stay interview. that we just talked about with this individual, and it was incorporated into the progression planning process to meet the needs of both workers. As a seasoned worker myself with adult children who are no longer at home, I have the flexibility to work outside of first shift and find that often gives me flexibility as well. So I researched a Forbes article titled 4 Keys to Building Your Leadership Bench Strength. And it highlights the gap that self-led leaders encounter when trying to advance their careers, but get stuck when they don't have real-world experience, but cannot get it until they're in that higher level position. I just had a colleague of mine share an example of that someone had brought to her in a different work setting than I currently work at. But it is a challenge, and it's what we call a gap when you're developing individuals. How do they get that leadership experience and skills? And so one option to overcome this are leadership development programs that serve the purpose of training identified workers to become leaders within your organization. A formalized leadership program is usually a structured program that ranges from weeks to months in duration and focuses on providing resources. They can be in person, online, or asynchronous, classroom setting, hands-on learning. It can be group debriefing and mentoring that prepares those individuals for actual job tasks and the challenges that come along with those jobs. I chose this graphic as it exemplifies the qualities we've reviewed, and the surveys that I did with the senior leaders identified as qualities they would choose in an individual who had bench strength. Empathy, intelligence, common sense, willing to learn, being friendly, and kindness come to mind when I look at this picture of the word leadership with an arrow pointing to a brain and another to a heart. So really it takes, a leader using all of those skills to be successful and to identify that individual's bench strength and to capitalize upon that. Another way to develop bench strength in your employees is through internship programs. I had the opportunity to meet with an employer last week who introduced me to an intern and said they hoped she would return to them when she completed her educational program. It's important that an organizational internship program allows interaction between the interns and leaders in the company that would allow them to return as an employee in the future. Employers can pull from educational programs like the ones listed here, as well as seasoned professionals. If you haven't seen the movie Intern with Robert De Niro and Anne Hathaway, it's a fun movie to watch. And as it says in this movie promo picture, experience never gets old, and tapping into those workers is a great way to develop bench strength, not only in those individuals who may want to continue to grow within their career, but also they can serve as a mentor to other individuals. Think about developing an internship program that leaders take an active role with those individuals. So cross-training is an excellent way to develop bench strength in your workers within a department, across departments, as well as across companies if more than one company exists under a larger umbrella. I know in my former work environment, we had several companies under one umbrella. So we had a lot of sister companies, and we did have the opportunity to work across departments as well as across companies. And that's a really great way to develop bench strength and really to have a great succession planning, not just for one organization, but multiple organizations under that larger umbrella organization. According to a LinkedIn article on 10 ideas for building your leadership bench strength, With better knowledge of other departments and the organizational system as a whole, leaders can help your departments function more effectively. And we go back to those qualities that we're looking for in individuals, and those were being part of a team, being a team player and team oriented. And really nothing speaks to that more than cross training and helping not only within your department and your team, but across departments and across the company as a whole. So with that, I want to share our last objective, and that is how Retain Kentucky can help individuals as well as employer organizations and workforce professionals to identify and develop bench strength within the setting that you work or with the individuals with whom you work. And the eligibility criteria to be able to help individuals at Retain Kentucky is that they must be a Kentucky resident, they must currently be employed or have worked in the last 12 months, and that they have not applied for or are receiving SSI or SSDI. And then the last criteria is that their injury or illness must not be work-related. So we want to have multiple ways that people can reach out to us, and they're all listed here. Individuals can call us at 859-562-3251. They can email at retain@uky.edu, visit our website at kyretain.org, or scan our QR code screener. And by doing so, this asks them those eligibility questions that I just outlined. And then if they meet those eligibility criteria, it will take them to our intake queue, where one of our intake coordinators will reach out to them and begin the process. So with that, I am going to thank you all for spending your low-cal lunch with me today. And I say that because we did not provide lunch. Really appreciate the folks who are on the call today that assisted with my research in today's presentation. And I'm looking at a question. As far as Retain Kentucky, it is for anybody who meets that eligibility criteria. It does not have to be a professional role. It can be service workers as well. And just want to thank those of you who have helped me so that in the preparation for today and information. So thanks to Judy Ann and Jamie that I see joined us today, and Danielle also for your input as senior executives. Really appreciate it. And if anybody has any questions, feel free to reach out to me, kimberly.wickert@uky.edu. And in the chat, our resources that I outlined, as well as our Retain Kentucky Media website and information to register for our next webinar in August.